Shalom. First and foremost, I want to give all praises, honor, and glory to Yahweh, Bahasham, Yahweh Shai, Bahasham, Rakha Kodesh. Double honors to the elders and the apostles of Great Millstone, and peace and blessings to the elect. And today we're going to go into the book of Zechariah, the 4th chapter. And in this chapter, as we continue in this vision that Zechariah is having, where the Lord is revealing these things to him, these mysteries, and particularly in the 4th chapter, it's written in a way where it's there are some dark sayings in there, that you'd have to decipher to understand the chapter. So we're going to go through it, and Lord willing, it'd be edifying to the elect. Now, as we go through this chapter, Zechariah the 4th chapter, I believe there are some breakdowns out there on it, like the elders and the apostles, and I'm sure some brothers have also already done lessons going into Zechariah the 4th chapter. And so, I'm going to keep it pretty basic for, understanding's sake and for the lesson's sake. But anyway, let's get into it. Now, this is the book of Zechariah chapter 4, verse 1. And the angel that talked with me came again and waked me, as a man that is wakened out of his sleep, and said unto me, What seest thou? So just remember in the previous chapter we read, Zechariah was, having this vision, right? And, he had this angel that was, talking with him, that went into the different, like in the 3rd chapter, he witnessed basically the vision of Joshua the high priest, with the filthy garments, so on and so forth. So continuing in verse 2, and said unto me, What seest thou? And I said, I have looked, and behold a candlestick of gold, and a bowl upon the top of it, and his 7 lamps thereon, and 7 pipes to the 7 lamps which are upon the top thereof. So you can imagine something that looks like a menorah, basically, okay, with the 7 lamps and then the 7 pipes, right? Where if we just look up a menorah, you can see something similar. Let me see if they have. What is this? This is which they ain't in the scriptures. They don't show. I don't know where to get this symbol from, but anyway, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Anyway, you get the gist of it, right? You have the pipes, and then you have the lamps, over there, right? So basically, he saw something that pretty much resembles or looks like a menorah. Verse 3, and 2 olive trees by it, one upon the right side of the bowl, and the other upon the left side thereof. So he's basically seeing this candlestick here, which represents it's a in his vision, that's what he sees, but it's a representation of ultimately this truth, right? The full and correct understanding, all right, of the mysteries of the scriptures, okay, which we call collectively the truth. And a precept for that, real quick. Let's go to the book of Proverbs, chapter 6, verse 23. And it reads, For the commandment is a lamp, and the law is light, and reproofs of instruction are the way of life. So in Proverbs chapter 6, verse 23, you can see how the commandments, right, which the scriptures, the words in the scriptures, all right, are the commandments of the Lord, right? And the law, as we read in the scriptures as well, is likened onto this lamp, okay, as well as this light here. Okay, so going back to Zechariah chapter 4, verse 2, that lamp, ultimately representing this truth. And then Zechariah also sees the 2 olive trees that were by it. Okay, and on a basic level, these 2 trees represent the 2 kingdoms of the nation of Israel, right? When you go back to the time of after the reign of King Solomon, the nation of Israel was split into 2 kingdoms, right? You had the kingdom of Israel and the kingdom of Judah. So in other words, the northern kingdom and the southern kingdom. And this is also mentioned, right? The two olive trees, they're also mentioned in the book of Revelation, the 6th chapter, or I believe the 11th chapter. I don't know why I just typed in 8. But let's take a look here. So you can see in Revelation chapter 11, you have here the mention of the two witnesses. Now, as a matter of fact, I believe if I even just cross-reference Zechariah 4 and 3 with other scriptures, Revelation should pop up here. There we go. Revelation chapter 11 verse 4 pops up over here. And this is an example as to why the scriptures say precept must be upon precept, right? Here a little and there a little. So let's go to the book of Revelation chapter 11, and we'll start at verse 3. So this is Revelation chapter 11 verse 3. And I will give power unto my two witnesses, which the two witnesses are synonymous with the two olive trees. Okay. And like I mentioned, overall, this represents the two kingdoms of Israel, right? The northern kingdom and the southern kingdom. And they shall prophesy 1,260 days, clothed in sackcloth. These are the two olive trees, right? Those two witnesses, and the two candlesticks standing before the God of the earth. And if any man will hurt them, right? The olive trees, the candlesticks, the witnesses, was referring to the same thing. So if any man will hurt them, fire proceedeth out of their mouth, and devoureth their enemies. And if any man will hurt them, he must in this manner be killed. Verse 6, these have the power to shut heaven, that it rain not in the days of their prophecy, and have power over waters to turn them to blood, and to smite the earth with all plagues as often as they will. Now, these, verse 5 and verse 6, are accounts of different events that took place, right? That were forms of the Lord bestowing power upon Israelites in their respective time periods to defend themselves or to perform these miracles. Okay. Now here, when we read it, it's saying that this is what the two witnesses or the two olive trees would do if they were in danger. Right now, the fire proceeding out of their mouth, that was an instance that happened during the time of Elijah, when the general, came with his army of 50 to try and take Elijah. He called on fire from heaven, and that devoured them, I believe, twice. And there was the third general that came, which had some sense and came correct, so he didn't get burned up. Okay, and likewise, you also had here Elijah again. In the book of Kings, you read about how he made it so that it would not rain. He prophesied that it would not rain for, I believe, about 3 years. Okay, now here you have this example, which goes back to the time of Moses, for example, right? When you read in the book of Exodus, Moses, through the spirit and power of Yahweh, Bahasham, Yahweh Shai, turned the waters to blood, right, and smote the earth, in this example, Egypt, with all these different plagues. So these were acts that were done by Israelites, okay? And as we're reading here, it mentions this is what the two olive trees would do. Okay, so now let's go back to the book of Zechariah chapter 4. Zechariah has now seen, right, this candle, this lamp, and he's seen the two olive trees beside them, which we just went into what that means. But to Zechariah, he did not know, right? So in verse 4, so I answered and spake to the angel that talked with me, saying, what are these, my Lord? So what does this mean? What does this represent? Then the angel that talked with me answered and said unto me, knowest thou not what these be? And I said, no, my Lord. And it's a little funny how, in some of these visions, the angels would ask the individual receiving the vision a question, and it almost sounds sarcastic in a way, right? Because they would, like you just said, I don't know what is this, and the angels, oh, so you don't know what it means. I think you read something similar also in the book of John, when they ask, like, what is this? And he's like, how am I supposed to know? Right? Thou knowest. Anyway, verse 6. Then he answered and spake unto me. So the angel responded, saying, This is the word of the Lord Yahweh unto Zerubbabel, saying, Not by might, nor by power, but by my spirit, saith the Lord of hosts. So now it mentions here Zerubbabel, and that's important because Zerubbabel is a key figure, not only in the time period that we're reading of here, as being one of the heads or the leaders at the time, but also he figures prominently, all right, in future prophecy as well, stealing some of those phrases from the Zondervan's Bible Dictionary. But anyway, it says here, not by might nor by power, but by my spirit, right? Because ultimately, whatever was going to be wrought by the hands of Zerubbabel, or even in general, is done by the Spirit of the Lord of hosts, right? Now, the word or the name Zerubbabel, when you actually go into it, let's see if the blue letter breaks it down accurately. Okay, you have Zerah Babal, which goes into, or which means, it says here sown in Babylon, but I believe it actually means destroyer of Babylon, if I'm not mistaken. But yeah, I'd have to double check that. Anyway, let's see. You have here from, that looks like Zarab. And it says here to dry up, be warmed, be burned, be scorched. Okay. Let me see if they have any other use cases for this. Okay, so not really much. Oh, it says is to perish, to be dissipated. So one of the definitions or the use cases here is for the first part of Zerubbabel's name, Zarab, is to dry up, to be warmed, but also to be burned or scorched. And when you go into the second part or the latter part, where you have the Babal, that goes into Babylon. Okay, so it would make sense that the name really should be, instead of sown, should be either like a destroyer or scorcher or something like that of Babylon. But anyway, let's continue reading here. So verse 7, Who art thou, O great mountain? Before Zerubbabel thou shalt become a plain, and he shall bring forth the headstone thereof with shoutings, crying, Grace, grace unto it. Now, once again, like I mentioned in the beginning, that within this vision that Zechariah is receiving, there are some dark sayings, and this is an example of one of them. Now, reading this on the surface level, right? Basically, when you look at it in the sense that nothing would stand in the way of Zerubbabel, right? Not even, like before him, something as great as a mountain would be reduced down to a plain, which a mountain is a high land, right? And the plain is leveled. Okay. Now, when you actually break this down further, the great mountain that's being referred to here is actually talking about Babylon, okay, today known as America. And a precept to prove that or support that is in the book of Jeremiah. I believe it's the 51st chapter and the 25th verse. This is Jeremiah chapter 51, verse 25. Now, Jeremiah, the 50th chapter, Jeremiah, the 51st chapter, these both are prophetically referring to the destruction of America or Babylon. Okay, so in the 25th verse, as we're reading, Behold, I am against thee, O destroying mountain, saith the Lord. So here the Lord is referring to Babylon as a destroying mountain, because there are times in the scriptures where you see the use of the word or the term mountain or hill, and it's not always referring to a physical mountain or physical hill, but rather a government, okay, or some body of rulership or authority. And in this case, that's referring to America. And it is likened unto a destroying mountain because that's what they do, right? They go around destroying peoples, countries, and even the earth. Saith the Lord, which destroyest all the earth. See? So that's why they're known as that destroying mountain. And I will stretch out mine hand upon thee and roll thee down from the rocks. Right. So like imagine like a mountain, a big, giant, tall mountain being broken down. And I will make thee a burnt mountain. And the manifestation of this in real life is going to be when World War III pops off, because it's going to be a nuclear war, and at least it's going to end in nuclear destruction. And this place, Babylon or America, is going to be burned by thermonuclear missiles. That is going to be the fulfillment of it becoming a burnt mountain. All right, nevertheless, going back to Zechariah, the 4th chapter and the 7th verse, when it refers to this great mountain before Zerubbabel, the deeper meaning is really referring to Babylon. And that's why it says here, before Zerubbabel, thou shalt become a plain. Okay, a plain meaning it's going to be leveled. It's going to be brought down. Which also lets you know that Zerubbabel, which we know and understand that reincarnation is biblical, but Zerubbabel, like I mentioned earlier, was a key figure during this time period with Zechariah and Haggai and the rest of the chief of the fathers. But he also plays or played an important role in times after that, prophetically as well. It says here, and he shall bring forth the headstone thereof with shoutings, crying, grace, grace unto it. And the headstone is referring to Yahushai. Okay, that cornerstone, which there are numerous precepts on that. But that headstone, and when it says bring forth, it means to herald in. Okay, so, and it's not only Zerubbabel, right, but also us. All right, the rest of the prophets, especially now in this time, that is what we are doing. We are heralding in the headstone, which is Yahushai, with shoutings, crying, grace, grace unto it. Okay, so and how are we doing that? By prophesying about the return of the Lord. Okay, and the scriptures talk about crying aloud and sparing not. But why is Zerubbabel mentioned? Because in this time, he was one of the once again, the heads or the prominent figures that led that ushering in or the heralding in of the headstone, which is Yahushai. Okay, and now let me see. There was a precept that came to mind. Right, let's get that, because it mentioned here that he would be brought forth with shoutings, crying, grace, grace. Right. So now let's go to the book of 1 Peter, chapter 4. Verse 14. And it reads, if ye be reproached for the name of Hamashiach, the anointed, happy are ye, for the spirit of glory and of God resteth upon you. On their part, he is evil spoken of. So on whose part? On the part of the unbelievers, those that are not of the elect. They speak evil of Yahushai. But on your part, he is glorified. See, and your part being the elect, right? The believers. And he is glorified. So guess what? That makes sense as to why in the ushering in or in the heralding in of Yahushai, it would be with shoutings, crying, grace, grace unto it. Verse 8, moreover, the word of the Lord Yahweh came unto me, saying. So now, in addition, when it says moreover, it means in addition. The hands of Zerubbabel have laid the foundation of this house. His hands shall also finish it, and thou shalt know that the Lord Yahweh of hosts hath sent me unto you. Now, during this time period, Zerubbabel was a part of those that laid the foundation of the house, of the temple, the second temple that is. And when you read into it, which we read in the book of Ezra as well, he also did finish building the temple, right, with the rest of the chief of the fathers and so on. However, and that was the physical temple. Okay, but however, there's also the spiritual temple, which Zerubbabel being one of the heads, okay, of that, he also laid the foundation for that as well, which that third temple or that spiritual temple represents once again the elect, otherwise known as the house of David. Okay, and just as he helped lay that foundation for it, he is also going to help with the finishing of the building of it. And the difference between the second temple that was built physically with hands and the third temple that is being built now, right? It started already, but it's being built now, not being physically done with hands, is now the way we're actually building this third temple is by prophesying, is by preaching. Okay, and that is likened on to what they did back then by actually getting the materials and the bricks and the physical building. Okay, but now the Lord has it being done in a spiritual manner. Nevertheless, that doesn't take away from the effect of it anyway. It says, and thou shalt know that the Lord Yahweh of hosts has sent me unto you. Right, so it would confirm the things that Zechariah is seeing here, okay, as coming to pass. Verse 10, for who hath despised the day of small things? For they shall rejoice and shall see the plummet in the hand of Zerubbabel with those 7. They are the eyes of the Lord Yahweh, which run to and fro through the whole earth. Now, when you read this, sometimes it helps. Of course, sometimes these other translations also are in error because they try to include interpretations in their translations. But there's some verses where they do a pretty decent enough job. So when you look at the majority of these other versions for Zechariah 4 and 10, that first part is really just saying, right, like it says here, do not despise in the NLT these small beginnings, right? And when you read, I believe it was either in the book of Haggai or might have been in the book of Zechariah, the Lord via one of those prophets asks the Israelites and says, which one of you is old enough to remember what the previous temple looked like? And for those of you that are, I'm sure you see how this basically is nothing in comparison to that, right? Nevertheless, though this may be small, though this may pale in comparison to it, keep on building with confidence because I am still with you. Okay, so as we're reading here, don't despise the day of small things or those small beginnings, because, right, for they shall rejoice and shall see the plummet in the hand of Zerubbabel. Now, when you go into that word here for plummet, it says here a bun, a stone, right? Large or small, common stone, stone as material, plummet, stones, and it's basically going into that, right? And we read about that because we just read that Zerubbabel would be laying that foundation, right? Heralding in that cornerstone. So they're going to rejoice when they see that in the hand of Zerubbabel with those 7, which now it tells you who they are, which are the eyes of the Lord that run to and fro through the earth, which is referring to the angels, right? And we read something similar in the book of Zechariah, the 1st chapter, right, where Zechariah saw those red horses that were going to and fro in the earth. Verse 11, then answered I and said unto him, what are these 2 olive trees upon the right side of the candlestick and upon the left side? And I answered again and said unto him, what be these 2 olive branches which through the 2 golden pipes empty the golden oil out of themselves? So these 2 olive branches, right, also represent the two kingdoms of Israel, but here more so the teachers, okay, the elect, the prophets, the men that are teaching, because they are the ones, as we're reading here, that are being likened onto pipes that are emptying that oil out of themselves, okay, because they are the chosen vessels to bear the truth. And by coming out here and prophesying and teaching, it is likened on to emptying that oil, which represents this truth or this knowledge, out of themselves. And similarly, Yahushua mentioned that he that believeth upon me, out of his belly shall flow rivers of living water, which those rivers of living water represented this understanding, this knowledge, wisdom, and understanding. Okay. And he answered me and said, knowest thou not what these be? And I said, No, my lord. And he said, These are the two anointed ones that stand by the Lord of the whole earth. Okay, which also ultimately goes back to those two olive trees, the two witnesses that we just read and covered. Okay, which, like I mentioned, on a high level or on an overall level is really referring to the southern kingdom and the northern kingdom. Okay, so that's pretty much the end of Zechariah, the 4th chapter. Like I mentioned before, there are, because of the vision that Zechariah is seeing, right? Even he himself didn't understand it, but there are some dark sayings here and there, some prophetic parts here and there. And keep in mind, right, sometimes these visions that the prophets received weren't always, before I use this word, let me just confirm here so I don't use it out of context. Okay, so it says here, logical and consistent. There we go. This makes sense. United as or forming a whole. So sometimes these visions that the prophets received weren't always coherent. All right, and the Lord did it that way because it would require the Spirit of the Lord to be able to decipher and put them all together. So some parts you're reading and you're like, why is it talking about this? Then it jumps to this, then it jumps to that. Similar to books like the book of Revelation, many chapters in that book. But one main example would be Revelation, the 20th chapter, as you have some time skips and jumps here and there. Okay. But ultimately in Zechariah 4, we basically, go into, this vision that Zechariah sees about the, the truth about the northern and the southern kingdom, and ultimately about the ushering in of Yahushai, and ultimately the importance, of Zerubbabel, but also the prophets and the teachers that would be prophesying, in the spirit of Yahweh Ba'ashem Yahushai. Okay, so with that, Lord willing, that was edifying to the elect. In closing, I want to give all praises, honor, and glory to Yahweh Ba'ashem Yahushai Ba'ashem Recha Kudash. And until next time, Shalom.